Tá. Hey, Laura. Me ouve? Ok. Teste saúde. Ok. Yes.
Our role for water diplomacy and climate action. I'm very grateful for speakers and discussants for joining us today. And let me briefly introduce them. So at the end of the session, we have two discussants. We have Mr. Leopold Nagour, who is the Secretary General of the Senegal River Basin Development Authority. And it's a real honor that he's joined us. Thank you. Equally, Mr. Bart Van Her, who is the Scientific Director at Deltaris and IPCC Working Group 2 co-chair. And Working Group 2 is on impact, adaptation, and vulnerability, as a reminder. And then some presentations to get us started will come from Ms. Karen Meyer, who's from the Netherlands Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. Mr. Professor Aaron Salzberg, you're online with us, and he's from the University of North Carolina, Department of Environmental Sciences and Engineering. Dr. Tedeschi Kadebu is from my own organization, the Geneva Water Management Center there. So, by way of introduction, I'll say a few words to set the scene. My name is Laura Curley, and I work at the Geneva Water Hub, where our work is all about using water as a source of peace and cooperation. We see in our work how climate change is becoming a growing source of tension over natural resources. So in places that are already dry, there's more rivalry for limited water. I've seen this in my own research in arid and semi-arid river basins such as the Ganges in India, the Colorado in the United States, and the Ebro in Spain. Climate change is contributing to rivalry for the resources across different sectors of the economy, creating difficult trade-offs between using water for agriculture or allocating it to cities or industries with higher economic output. And then there's places that really didn't have to think about water and sharing water before drought, didn't have to deal with drought beforehand. There was relative abundance, and now they're facing tensions and concerns about the future of water as well. I've seen this in the city of Geneva, where we're based, where France and Switzerland realize now the need to be more explicit in cooperation and have just signed a new agreement over extreme weather events or extreme precipitation. And in Canada, also where I'm from, I've seen this trend. Climate change also exposes gaps in government systems, where certain groups have less access, no permits, or fewer rights. The individuals and communities hit hardest are often those who are already vulnerable for historical, social, or economic reasons. Some of these tensions are highly technical, for example, how large infrastructure is operated or how flows are managed across seasons. But water is also deeply political. It raises questions about who gets water when, under what conditions. Allocation decisions are embedded in historical, social contexts that bring up all sorts of issues, power, equity, access. And this is where water diplomacy comes in. Water diplomacy is about actors working together to prevent, manage, and resolve conflicts through the combined use of diplomatic tools, water-related expertise, and cooperation mechanisms. It takes place at multiple levels, and we'll hear more about this from our next speakers. We often think of it as state-to-state formal processes, which is considered track one diplomacy, ministers and diplomats, but it can and often does happen in more informal or multi-stakeholder spaces involving universities, research institutes, or civil society groups. At the Geneva Water Hub, as a university-based research center, we see clearly the benefits of having these non-state actors involved, as they can often act as connectors, facilitators, or neutral spaces for dialogue. In this session, we're going to delve into the world of water diplomacy, and think of it together as a key climate adaptation and resilience action. As a preventative tool, water diplomacy allows countries or communities to plan ahead, to make provisions for changing flows at the borders before tensions arise, or to agree on priorities and operations in advance, and help avoid flashpoints. As a conflict resolution tool, Water can serve as a platform for dialogue, a shared concern that brings parties to the table, helping to stabilize conflict and even open up pathways for broader cooperation. So, when you think about climate adaptation, water diplomacy is not an abstract concept. It's a very practical set of skills and relationships that can help turn climate stress into collaboration. Before we begin, I want to highlight the resource that many of today's speakers have contributed to, and here we can change the slide. I think it's on to change the slide. So this is the Routledge Handbook of Water Diplomacy. It's been recently published. It's completely free, open access online, and it brings a wealth of experience on negotiation, cooperation, and governance in complex water contexts. So all of the presenters are actually from different authors of the different chapters. They didn't want to necessarily promote it themselves, so I'll do it for them. It's a fantastic resource. There's a QR code on the slide, and we'll share this slide at the end so you can scan it and easily have access. So with that, I'd like to turn to our presentations. I've given each of the speakers about 10 minutes to set the stage for a discussion at the end, if we have time. Hopefully we do. I would also like to propose just one unifying question or thought. We might not be able to have time to discuss it, but a thought that we can all have in the back of our minds is, what are some of the concrete ways actors involved in climate action, climate change action, whether funding, whether designing projects, whether involved in negotiations, how can these actors benefit from water diplomacy? So with that, I would like to pass it over to our first presentation. By Ms. Karen Meyer, who's on site.
Yes. Good afternoon. I hope this works and that you can also hear me online. Can you hear me online as well? Okay, good. Thank you. Welcome everyone also on my behalf. Thanks for your patience. I see. Are you sure you can hear me? You have to speak closer to it? Okay, good. Thanks. So thanks for your patience staying here. As you cannot? Oh, you need to wear the headphones maybe. I was introduced as, working with the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, but it's maybe fair to say I joined the ministry only a year ago, and the chapter that I'll present on that is in the handbook I wrote when I was still with the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute in Sweden. And there are 3 points I would like to make in this presentation. The title of my presentation is Water as a Source of Conflict, Climate Adaptation as a Solution. But the first point I'd like to make that water issues in themselves do not cause conflicts. Conflicts occur when water issues exacerbate political, social, cultural, economical fault lines. In those circumstances, under these conditions, water can contribute to conflict and security risks. And climate change can obviously further worsen these situations. And internationally, water issues have not yet at least, caused war. But at subnational level, there are instances, actually quite a lot of localized conflict where water did play a role. And I think the climate security pathways that CIPRI developed or identified are quite useful to understand how climate-related and water-related issues can result in conflict. So they identified 4 pathways. They're all related to livelihood, and the first pathway is direct competition over livelihood resources, especially in rural areas where livelihoods strongly depend on water issues. And the other 3 pathways build on issues related to livelihoods. So if people lose their livelihoods, they may migrate to other areas and put greater pressure on resources and social structures in these areas, often in cities. But also migratory patterns of herders change as a result of climate change and water issues. So there are also situations where conflicts have arisen between farmers and herders, because as a result of climate change, farmers are looking for water sources to water their cattle, and they may return from fields earlier before harvests are taken from the fields and clash with farmers. So there's the livelihood issue, the migration issue, but then there's also the issue that armed groups can take advantage of these situations when impoverished rural people in particular don't really have many opportunities to sustain their livelihoods, and armed groups offer a good source of income. And not only income, but also a way for young men in particular to gain some status and contribute to their identity. So the tactics of armed groups are also influenced by climate and water. And then the fourth pathway is related to institutions and management of natural resources. Because although water plays a role, it's usually not the quantity of water or the actual water availability. Usually it's about access to water and who gets access or what you have to give in return for access. So the way water resources are managed and the institutions involved in that can also play a large role where people are exploited, especially in water scarce situations. So water issues do not in themselves cause conflicts, but water and climate can play a role. And then of course the question is, if water and climate can play a role in the increasing conflicts, violent conflicts and security risks, it would make sense to think that water management and climate adaptation can contribute to reducing those risks. Unfortunately, there's been some research that shows that a lot of climate adaptation and water management projects distribute risks rather than reduce risks. So they can actually, these measures that are meant to improve the well-being of the people can actually form a cause of conflicts themselves. So it's really important to understand this social and economic and political context before intervening in any situation. And as part of understanding this context and engaging in more conflict-sensitive water management and climate adaptation, the process in which stakeholders are engaged is also really important. And I think we had a nice example a couple of years ago where the Water Peace and Security Partnership collaborated with the GIZ's Frexus project in Niger, where there was also a conflict between farmers and herders over the drilling of a well. And what was interesting is that there we were first asked to model the situation and find a solution based on that model, but we said instead of starting with modeling, we do a joint analysis of the situation together with the local stakeholders through a participatory analysis process. And that worked quite well. We did it in 3 countries, and especially in Niger, we got very positive responses. And part of the process was that it was a participatory process with a group working like a group model building process with a group of stakeholders from different sides. But we started with individual conversations with the different stakeholders, and that allowed them to bring issues, sensitive issues to the table that no one would have raised in a group meeting, but because it was already on the table, it could be introduced into the meeting and it could be discussed. So that worked really well in terms of having a constructive conversation. So this joint analysis did 2 things. On the one hand, it increased insight in how climate, water, the resources and the conflicts were linked. Insights in the system, but also insights in how the conflict could be solved. But maybe more importantly is that it improved the relations between those stakeholders, which led to a willingness to actually adopt solutions. So these processes, I think, are really important, but also those processes as part of a more technical analysis or project may not be sufficient in situations of protracted conflict or recurring conflict. Because as I said in the beginning, it's not the water issues that cause the conflict. It is the underlying social governing context and the root causes underneath. So to really take measures that sustain peace, that lead to sustainable peace, it's really important that there are also processes that address these root causes as part of peace building. So these could be processes that build institutions to peacefully resolve conflicts over future water issues. And as part of that also to increase legitimacy of the government and of those institutions. So I realize when I say this is that environmental peace building may not be the responsibility or even the capacity of those working on water management and climate adaptation, but I think also for those working on water management and climate adaptation, it's really important to be aware that a technical solution, even if it's done in a really well-prepared participatory process, may not be sufficient to really contribute to building peace. So maybe this last point is also a call for more collaboration between peace builders and water management and those work on climate adaptation. Thank you for your attention. Yes, thank you, Laura. And may I invite Bart, and I'm really sorry not to have your name correct, Mr. Nadour from Senegal, to come onto the stage. Sorry, this is a bit improvised, as you can imagine. But please have a seat. I think the sound was, well, I hope you were able to follow the presentations that were online well. And there are two questions that we would like to have your reaction on. And the first question is, what are your reactions to what you've heard as practitioners from diplomacy and from climate science, respectively? So shall we start with the practitioner view from Senegal? And then I would also like to ask, I'll give you the microphone. We have a translator because Mr. Nadour will speak in French. I'll give the microphone to Malia. Is he? You have to switch, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think you just have to hold it close.
Huh? Okay. 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 Thank you. My English is very bad. I speak in English, but Malia helped me to translation. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci beaucoup. Merci des présentations. Nous avons bien suivi. Et je pense que c'est très important ce qui a été dit concernant les conflits liés à l'eau, les sources potentielles de conflits, mais également les instruments juridiques, etc. La diplomatie de l'eau est très importante. Au niveau de la région Afrique de l'Ouest, nous sommes un organisme de bassin qui est autour du fleuve Sénégal qu'on appelle OMVS. C'est un organisme de bassin qui est cité partout dans le monde parce qu'il joue un rôle important concernant la prévention des conflits, mais également le développement socio-économique autour du bassin partagé, qui est le fleuve Sénégal, du moins, le fleuve Sénégal partagé par 4 pays, le Sénégal, le Mali, la Mauritanie et la Guinée. La diplomatie de l'eau est... You want to translate? Ouais, vous pouvez traduire cette partie.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the organization of OMVS, I would like to thank you all for putting water diplomacy at the forefront on the debates on stability, peace, and peace consolidation. The Senegal River is the river, the Senegal River. The Senegal River, it's a common good shared by 4 countries of West Africa, Guinea, Mali, Senegal, and Mauritania. And this, its management, it's strategic asset for peace and also economic development in the region.
Merci. Cette gestion transfrontalière permet de réduire les risques et de maximiser les opportunités autour du bassin. Donc, ça permet de manière générale à prévenir les conflits autour du fleuve Sénégal. Et nous avons quelques principes directeurs, notamment la solidarité entre les États, et la non-appropriation des eaux autour du cours d'eau, le partage des bénéfices comme objectif central de la gestion concertée, une approche intégrée eau, climat, développement, reliant les politiques hydriques et les plans d'adaptation ainsi que la sécurité alimentaire, l'inclusion des communautés, ça c'est très important, avec une attention particulière aux femmes et aux jeunes, et la décision fondée sur les sciences, la transparence et l'adaptabilité, parce qu'au niveau du bassin, il y a beaucoup d'études qui se mènent mais également il y a un suivi de la ressource en eau et les informations sont partagées. Ça permet de réduire les incompréhensions et de décider sur les options, surtout quand il s'agit des prélèvements d'eau ou bien voilà, qui peuvent impacter d'un pays à l'autre. Donc tout ça est fondé sur des décisions techniques et scientifiques qui permettent de réduire ces incompréhensions. Vous pouvez traduire cette partie?
So OMVS principles are fivefold. So OMVS is based on cooperation, intergovernmental cooperation, and non-appropriation of water, of the waters. We all share equally the benefits and this is the main objective of the water management, concerted water management. We all have integrated policies that turn around water, climate, and development related to NDCs and food security. We also push that all communities are included with particular attention to women and youth. And finally, all decisions are based on transparency and science. So this is the pillar to the success of all this cooperation among countries. The access to data enable everyone to achieve a proper management. So sorry, and adaptability. Thank you.
Excusez-moi, mais en vue de temps, can I go to the next reflection? Because you have to leave also soon. Je reviens à vous plus tard, mais maintenant je donne le microphone.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. No, but let's move on to the science part, because I think that is my perspective. To be honest, a scientist, I guess, also is trained to be skeptical, or at least trained to think in multiple directions. And if I look at water diplomacy, it's definitely not my field, but I'm very happy to know you and know that this is a very profound direction for negotiation. And I can definitely recognize the assets that you say. It gives a common language, and certainly when it is transparently evidence-based, it also gives a common point of departure. I'm not a diplomat, but I also recognize from the diplomacy, from what we see here in the room, UNFCCC, but even also in IPCC, diplomacy also is a profession that needs to interchange between, public, multilateral negotiations, and sometimes save space to actually really come to a common understanding. You made the case as well. You sometimes need to retreat from the bigger picture to really be building trust and coming together. And that is, for scientists, I think it's a bit ambivalent. Because it leads to the notion that also here we are negotiating the global goal on adaptation, and it's so difficult to agree in a multilateral environment on the indicators, because people are really afraid to, reduce their future options. But then, if you retreat in a smaller space, it's so obvious that a common scientific departure is very crucial. And for us, that's a bit strange to admit that there is apparently science that is desirable and science that is not desirable. Apparently, in diplomacy, sometimes it's better not to know. And we as scientists have to get used to it, but that is a reality, I guess. But talking about science, I'm here with Shireen and Andrew. Andrew just left. They are part of my support unit in IPCC. They are both excellent water experts. And so they can tell me the previous IPCC report did talk about water and diplomacy and water and adaptation, it's really well demonstrated that particularly in agriculture, adaptation works. And there's all kinds of metrics to show. But it's also clear that there is a lot of uncertainty in the knowledge to what extent the adaptation that we do for today still works for tomorrow. And that is not only because of the scenarios and the uncertainty in the climate, but it is also about how effective is a certain adaptation. And I guess that also holds for diplomacy. In diplomacy, you make an arrangement between, users and providers of water, and you're never sure if climate or socioeconomic conditions change, whether these arrangements still hold. So in the diplomacy, that variability over time needs to be part of the discussion, I guess. And then finally, I think scientists we also have discussions in Deltares sometimes. I think it's very important for the scientists to realize that the way you measure how the real world works matters in diplomacy. You made a very good comment that in many cases adaptation is not reducing risk, but it is redistributing risks. And it is crucial for us to understand that the way you measure risk is at the heart of diplomacy. We can express risk in capital damage, expected damage, but we can also express it in how long do you have to work to repair the damage. And in one metric you prioritize expensive assets, and in the other it's actually low income that you would like to. And your computer programs don't tell which metric most sense. Diplomacy, which metrics most sense. And I get that is nice where science can, when done right, can.
Oi, 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 oi. Oi.
Thank you. Is this better?
Oh.
Okay.
Oi.
Just the word empathy, like the word empathy. Done right, science direction. Okay.
Isso. Oi, 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 oi.
Another try. Yes, again. Yeah. I was trying to round up because I really would like you to respond if possible. But we can help empathy in the negotiation, but we need to understand how diplomacy works as well.
Thank you, Bart. I know we're not yet done entirely. I'll let you go in a minute. Thank you for making the case also that even though diplomacy is about reaching agreements, it also needs to have a scientific underpinning, because otherwise you may run into trouble in later years. I think that's a really good point. I just wanted to give the floor to you one more time to reflect on this point. What do you see of how science and knowledge inform diplomacy? Do you see a role for that from your perspective? And then we end.
Ouais, merci beaucoup. C'est vrai, la science et le savoir, hein, je pense que sont je peux dire même des vecteurs importants pour la diplomatie, parce que ça permet d'éclairer les parties pour qu'ils puissent dialoguer entre eux. Par exemple, si je prends l'exemple de l'OMVS, chaque 3 mois, il y a la commission des experts qui se réunit, voilà, pour échanger sur les problématiques du bassin basées sur des données ou des études pour pouvoir, disons, conseiller aux décideurs de prendre des décisions pour une bonne gouvernance du bassin. Donc ça, c'est très important pour la science. Maintenant, il faudrait, au-delà de ça aussi, il faut associer les savoirs locaux.
Allô? Oui, it's working. Vous voulez finir votre propos?
Oui, je disais, pour la dernière partie, c'est les communautés, les savoirs locaux. Il faut aussi les impliquer dans les décisions. Au-delà de la science et des savoirs entre experts,
Can you hear me? Yes. So, yes, fundamentally, we totally agree with you, Mr. Bert from the IPCC. At OMVS, all the committee of experts reunites every 3 months to discuss, and based on solid data, consolidated data, to enable to discuss all the key problematics of the river and of the river. And furthermore, beyond data, because data is the basis of diplomacy and dialogue among all parties, what is key is local communities and multi-level governance to enable an efficient approach and governance of the river.
I'm really sorry to end the discussion, but since we started so late, I also don't want to run too much over time. I'd really like to thank our discussants for staying late and sharing your reflections, which I think are really useful, insightful.